Before I get started, are there any people, visually impaired people, low vision, blind? Okay. The reason I asked that before each talk is because I want to narrate my slides, so I just wanted to make sure before that. Nobody's used this couch for it's like on here. You should I'm going to do this. I'll just do my talk here. Is that okay? And now you make me feel like I want to do it. But actually, I really, really, really want to thank Mark for letting me come. This is me when he told me I could talk here. I put a wig on so I look like Mark, but so I'm really happy that Mark understood that my talk at Front End Zurich was just a fluke. Because what happened was never ever change a variable name in a live coding demo at a conference right before you go speak. The talk there at Front End Zurich had a lot of demonstration in it, and I totally butchered the entire thing. And somehow he had enough pity to let me come here. Speaking of train wrecks, I'm so good at screwing up talks that I have a web series on YouTube with another screw-up named Billy Gregory. And our goal with accessibility is we want to try to make accessibility more accessible through the use of humor and stuff like that. Because let's face it, accessibility is not a really popular topic, right? It isn't sexy. It's not something like, it doesn't get people excited like the latest Node 10 release with async and await or something like that, or Flexbox or CSS Grid or anything like that's really interesting. It's just accessibility, and we really like to tell people all the shit that they've done wrong. And it's easy, actually, because there's a lot of ways to get accessibility wrong. So... yeah, I love this. This is like, you can park your scooter up there, maybe a bike or something. So we can see from this picture there's a lot of ways that people get accessibility wrong. I took this picture actually in Vienna, and honestly, I don't know what the hell that's for. I'm hoping it's for a hand truck, like to go up the stairs, because if that's a wheelchair ramp, that's probably really fun to go down. Until like your wheel comes off on the slide and it's like bang, 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 bang against the railing. Huh? Buggy. Oh, for parents. No, it's for wheelchairs to go down, I'm telling you. It's fun. I call this picture, it's artistic, and Vic's not the only artistic person in the room. This is my art representation called Universal Unusability. I took this picture in Costa Rica. That's literally the only way to get into that building. So that's like, here, you'll have your equality. Everybody has a hard time. Another artistic piece of mine. I call this one Conformance. The alternate title is You Had One Job. This is, I think this is located at a BART station in California. This one is great. This is really, this is a highly specialized type of accessibility chair, and it's for people who only have one leg. To be more accurate, really, it's for people with only a left leg. The R&D is still ongoing right now for the right-legged version. This is just a field study. This movie is a physical example of trying to fix all of your accessibility problems with Way Aria. We have a perfect accessible parking spot. We have a nice little ramp. The ramp has a perfect incline. I'll talk about that later. We've got diamond plate so you don't slip while it's wet. You turn around, you go in here, elevators and stairs. So we go in here. Fuck it, I'll just go down. I'll take this moment to drink a little bit. I really wish with all of my heart that everyone here experiences disability. I hope that you all live a happy, long, and rewarding life. My friend, Jim Forrester, a good friend of mine, For any of you who are into stoner rock, he was the bass player of a 60-watt Shaman. Jim was killed by gun violence in the city of Baltimore, Maryland at 43. Jim will never have the happiness of becoming disabled. And what I mean by this is if we're all lucky enough to live to old age, you will be disabled. So these are a series of slides I stole from the IRS. As Wesley mentioned, the IRS cannot hold intellectual property, so I greedily stole their shit. And these are a series of slides discussing what our likelihood is of having a disability at some time. The hash mark example is somebody with a functional limitation that may require some sort of adaptive techniques or something like glasses, right? Something simple like that, maybe. And in a severe functional limitation, this is what we often refer to as a disability. So what does that really look like? So at the age range of 15 to 24 years, the functional limitation is about 6.3%. The severe functional limitation is at 2%, 2% of the population. At the age range of 35 to 44, that's us. Actually, that's not me anymore anyway. But 3% have a severe functional limitation. At 45 to 54, who's that in here? I know some of you guys over there need to be raising your hands. 6%. 55 to 64, 12%. 65 to 69, 18.5%. 70 to 74 years old, 22%. 75 plus. How many of us want to live beyond 75? For anyone else, please see me. We'll talk about depression. I certainly want to live that long. 41% of people 75 plus have a severe functional limitation. So I'm guessing that we should probably try to get this stuff right. Now, there used to be a time when we defined accessibility in purely a physical context, that the context was there was something wrong with this person. And now, the World Health Organization has sort of shifted their thinking on that. They talk about the social model of accessibility. And so in the social model, disability happens at points of interaction between a person and their society when they're denied access to something. Okay? When they're denied access due to some sort of barrier, their impairment to their ability did not occur because of their body's limitations. The defect occurred in the system that caused the inaccessibility, the technology in this case. So the role of web accessibility is going to be to provide the corrective course of action, to remediate the defects in the technology. I said that again, the defects in the technology to allow for equal access of persons of all disabilities. By the way, this picture is from the Ontario College of Art and Design. It's really cool. Each picture in their museum has also a set of headphones next to it with, I think it's a Raspberry Pi thing that narrates the purpose and the content of the art. Anybody ever seen the movie Kindergarten Cop? All right. So this is Arnold. There's a part in there where he gets the kids around, and he goes, "We're going to play a wonderful game." Who is your daddy and what does he do? So we're going to play a game, okay? And this game is going to be called Lazy Ass Person or Disability Tool. So this is an automatic can opener, and it's opening some pickles. They had a picture of like olives or something like that, and I was like, olives, gross. So pickles, the little arms here go around. They hold the jar in place. The motorized piece grabs onto the lid, turns it. So, man, you are a lazy-ass person if you have to use this, right? I don't know. What if you have a palsy disorder? What if you have only one hand? What if you are lacking grip strength? So this is great. This would be awesome for somebody with ALS or a palsy disorder. This is the Buoy. So this is an extremely simple contraption, right? You put it in the pot, turn the heat on, stick that in the water, and when the water starts boiling, it's it's going to bob and weave like this, and it's also got a little teeny tiny bell, just like a buoy, outside in the sea or something like that. So is this a product for a lazy-ass person? Or is it a product for somebody who is blind and can't notice the water boiling, or who is deaf and can't hear the water boiling, or is mobility impaired and can't go back and forth to check whether the thing's moving around or not? Who doesn't love pancakes? So in my house, I don't really cook very much because my wife is such an awesome cook that my best day cooking is worse than her worst day cooking. But I'm awesome at breakfast. Awesome. But when I create the pancake batter, and then I go to put it on the griddle, I just take the bowl and I'm just like scoop, 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 with the spatula until I think I have enough. If you've ever been to like a place that does tons of pancakes, you've seen like a big metal version of this. He's just like, and it squeezes the stuff out, and I can do that again. Okay. It squeezes that out, and the perfect size pancakes and all that sort of stuff. So is this a lazy-ass person, or is it awesome for someone with only one arm who can't do the scooping, or something like that, or someone who is blind who doesn't know if they have the right amount on there? You just go, and it's right there. I'm going to do that throughout the presentation now, just like, okay. He's going to be sampling. He's going to be. Teapot. Again, this is the ultimate in lazy contraptions, right? You just like, and you have your tea. But think about it if you're blind and you have to be like trying to aim. And now I'm not saying blind people are incompetent. They manage perfectly fine with tea. But, it's just so easy to stick it there, and then you're done. I actually don't know what the hell these are. I was just like, whoa, what the fuck is that? And I wanted to put it in slides. Okay. So this is a thing called a Foldimate. Have you ever seen this? And there's a rival to it. It's called the Laundroid. And these have been publicly promoted since 2015. They've had multiple rounds of social fundraising and all that sort of stuff. And it turns out that folding t-shirts and jeans is really easy. Folding underwear and hoodies, not so easy. But the robots are coming. And this is a job I will gladly let the robots have. So having only one hand, or having a tremor or chronic pain disorder, this is awesome. Let's level it up a little bit here. Who here uses Apple Pay? Yeah. I guess not. Well, Americans. Anybody use Apple? I can even use my watch. I can just be like, and pay with my watch. Now, what's great about this type of payment, though, is it's going back to the use case in the United States. It's awesome for people who are blind because for some dumb reason, all of our money is the exact same size and shape, has the exact dimensions. A $1 bill and a $100 bill are exactly the same. So blind people get ripped off all the time. When they go to get change from the register, the person's like, yeah, here you go, here's your change, $75, and it's really like a bunch of ones. Whereas with something like this, you know what you got paid because there's voiceover on the iPhone or TalkBack on the Android that gives them that information about what they paid and all that sort of stuff. So this is a screenshot of an app about a story in England. The Gatwick Airport has a series of beacons inside the airport, and you can use this app to figure out where you got to go. So if you need to find your airline to go check your bags, if you need to go find security or whatever, you can use that. Now, the implication for this kind of stuff is huge, right? For both privacy and accessibility. Mostly, I think the benefits and the dangers are there need to be weighed pretty heavily because this is where we can really track you to the literal footstep. But for accessibility, this is really awesome because imagine you go to a mall or you go to a very large indoor space, a sports complex, a stadium or something like that, then you can like use an app to figure out where you are, and you don't have to ask somebody. If you know anybody who's blind, ask them how they get around in airports. Typically, like somebody at the airport will be like, "Here, get in this wheelchair. We'll just take you where you got to go." And the blind person's like, "I'm not paralyzed. I'm blind. Just let's go." So, where's the bathroom? I had to ask Mark where the bathroom was, and he's like, "Upstairs. There's a green room up there." I don't think you know this. There's a green room. People giving foot massages to the speakers. You didn't know that? This is called a view bell. This is an actual camera doorbell that you can put on your house, and you can see who's at the door. So again, imagining that you are visually disabled, you don't know who's at the door. This isn't going to tell you. I don't know why I was going there with that. If you're, because it's not going to. That would be awesome though if it had AI and it'd be like, "That's Joe." Or physically disabled, and you want to know whether who it is. Like, is it a delivery guy, or maybe you're just like a sad neckbeard who really doesn't expect anybody to come by except the pizza man. This is the QuickSet Smart Scan, and what's really cool about that is, and I really like this from a design perspective, because other than the teardrop sort of thing, it looks just like a normal lock, right? Not a big deal, and it's got the little biometric part you stick under there. And this is, for anybody who works in the web and is familiar with WCAG, this is what I would call like multiple ways, right? There's multiple ways of doing this thing. We have both the lock, the traditional lock, and the finger scan. This is a Nest thermostat. Supposedly, this thing learns how to keep the proper temperature in your house. Although I think my Nest thermostat at home has only learned how to do the exact opposite of whatever I want. But it's cool because I can't really complain too much, because if it gets it wrong, I just open the app and turn the thing and it's done. So again, not needing to get up, not needing to read the temperature, because I'm sure VoiceOver could handle this stuff on the app. This is a Chrysler Rotary shift. So again, imagine you have a motor impairment or something like that, messing around with a shifter, even an automatic shifter, kind of a pain in the ass. You can just click the dial over to where you want to go. Sadly, this has been discontinued. Chrysler is discontinuing it in 2019. BMW has these as well. I had one in a rental car one time. I think they're probably going to go away because people find them confusing. Most people found them confusing. But I think it's really awesome for accessibility, right? Because instead of, they require minimal movement. Has anybody used one? They require really minimal movement, coordination, and strength to mess with that thing. So I really like it. But I got to tell you that they should have understood that this is a bad idea. This is an Edsel push-button shift from 1958, and people hated it then. So they should have probably understood the problem there. But I really like the concept. And let's face it, it's not like a shifter. People are like it; they find it confusing, but it's not like a shifter these days is really doing much shifting. It's there's no cables under there like they were in old cars. They're electronics. This is not a commentary on cops. No, the Segway is it's a revolutionary product. Various versions of the Segway have been used in law enforcement. They've been used for EMTs. They've been used for factories and all that sort of stuff. And the common use case really is to increase speed without increasing the effort of the person. And it also reduces fatigue over time. If you have to go places a lot, then walking still is a little bit fatiguing when you do it all day. But what you probably don't know is that the Segway had origins in accessibility. So the Segway was actually what followed after a thing called the iBot. And the iBot was created by a guy named Dean Kamen. His company, DECA, also holds patents for a number of other medical things. Blood transfusion pumps, insulin pumps, portable dialysis machines, all this sort of stuff was invented by Dean. Another really cool thing that Dean Kamen did is he created a thing called FIRST, which stands for Inspiration and Recognition of Science and Technology. And that's been going on since 1989, and the goal with FIRST is to get kids involved into science and technology and engineering. And I've actually seen one of these before. They're a bit unnerving when you first see it. You're like, dude, what? What are you doing? Because they're up. The cool thing about it is it brings the person eye to eye with the other person that they're speaking with is not also in a wheelchair, which is actually huge socially for people with who are in wheelchairs. So I purposely oversold the title of this talk because often people think that accessibility requires you to make things ugly. And I think that the lack of creativity makes inaccessible or accessible things ugly, okay? People use accessibility as some sort of excuse, like, oh, I can't do that because it's going to make it ugly. And I'm going to say no. So this is a picture of a postal service building. I believe this is in Washington, D.C. The not squished version of the picture is bigger, but you'll see here there's obviously ramps there. And hundreds of people use those ramps every day without even thinking of the fact that they're using a ramp. It has a perfect slope as defined by the ADA as being no more than 1 inch per 12 inches of horizontal travel. And that's, I think it's pretty attractive. And so we can even go a little bit further from large public buildings to houses. You probably don't notice this at first glance, but this is another view of accessibility hidden in plain view. This house has a 0-step entryway. And you probably don't think about it a lot when you go into your own house or go into other buildings, but there's almost always a step in the doorway, right? And so that step immediately becomes a barrier to anyone in a wheelchair or anyone who's in a walker or something like that. It couldn't be more simple. They're probably no more than 8 inches high, and it becomes an immediate barrier. So what's the solution to that? Put a ramp in there. Well, no, because that kind of sucks too, because the ramp then becomes a barrier to whoever's trying to walk, because it's like, no, I just want to step in and go. So a 0-step entryway is perfect. It's still attractive, and it's universally usable for everybody who's coming in. There's a 0-step entryway here to this theater. We need to recognize that none of this kind of stuff happens on accident. And this is where people use the excuse, well, accessibility is hard, and it takes too long. Does performance take too long? Is it hard? Probably, but we do it, right? Everybody's like, perf, woo, And security, we don't question security, do we? No, even though it adds extra time, adds extra effort, requires specialized domain knowledge. And I love this because I love the idea of telling people that all it requires is sort of purposeful design. So effective city planning is also user experience, right? So in this case, the users here in this situation are the people using the walkway, the pedestrian zone here, the sidewalks, the roads, the parking areas, all that sort of stuff. Those are our users. And each of those users has a specific context of use. Right? The pedestrian wants to be able to walk down to the next place that they want to visit without getting hit by a car. Right? The person parking or the person who is parked, they want a safe place to park so they can get out and start using this new context. And the person driving needs to go somewhere else. And what's cool here, the parking becomes a safety barrier for the people on the streets. If it's wide enough, it means we can park without too much interference, but we make it narrow enough so people don't go too fast. And in this regard, accessibility is nothing more than a different context of use. It's really it. Person on a screen reader, not any different than any other person other than the context of their use. And so when it comes to designing for accessibility, you have to plan for it. So this is actually a product I worked with for AOL and Verizon, and now I guess it's Oath. I don't know what they're called now. They keep changing. But they bought a company called LDQ Wi-Fi, and they're going to be putting these things on the streets in Manhattan. And so what's cool about it is at the top, you'll see in a second, there's a bunch of advertising on there. It's got a touch screen. As you can see, it's localized a little bit. It's a big ass, like 35-inch by 20-inch Android tablet behind all that sort of stuff. And it's really great. You can have they have like a Yelp-like app for exploring what's going on in the area, subway schedules, all that sort of stuff. It's really, really tall. It's about 5 meters tall. It's got advertising at the top. It's got a little scrolly thing there. There's actually ways for it to alert people of emergencies and all that. So this being on the streets in New York and having the overall like unwashed masses poking at this thing requires a lot of planning, especially when it comes to accessibility. So one of those concerns is color contrast. And that's something that I experienced a long time ago with a project I worked on for Sprint Nextel and NASCAR for a device that is used at NASCAR races. You may have heard it, or may have seen it at football matches. It's called the Fan View. I don't know if anybody's ever seen that. But it was first deployed in the United States for races. Anyway, so color contrast, even if the user interface of this thing had a WCAG level A or even AAA contrast, you put that thing in the sun and you have extra problems. So we had to think about that. Now, because it has a user interface on it that we can touch and interact with, it needs to be accessible to non-visual users. As an Android tablet, we could just allow TalkBack to turn on and use TalkBack, but actually that requires access to the settings. And settings requires requires a privileged access that we don't want public people messing with because they could do all sorts of damage with it. So this is called the Easy Access Keypad, and we put one of these on there. They actually have an updated version that isn't so ugly. It's called the Easy Access Keypad, and it makes the app self-voicing. It has its own SDK, and you can program it so the app itself is self-voicing for people. And so you have all the controls you need: up, down, left, right, back, next, info, all that sort of stuff. And what's cool about it too is it doesn't announce anything out the speakers. As soon as you put your headphones in there, though, it'll start announcing to you. This was actually invented by the Trace Research Center. Anybody know who the Trace Research Center is? If you follow WCAG, you should know that the Trace Research Center is where a lot of the WCAG 1.0 guidelines came from. Greg Vanderheiden and a couple of other people at the Trace Research Center, Wendy Chisholm, who is now at Microsoft, was part of that group. And they're really pioneers in accessibility, and especially kiosk accessibility. But a lot of the initial WCAG 1.0 guidelines were actually borrowed from the Trace Research Center and a couple of other places. We also have physical concerns. So for a person with a wheelchair, we need to make sure that that person can reach to the touchscreen and touch all the bits and pieces in the touchscreen. So if you ever use an elevator, you might notice that there is about an 18-inch or 18 to 24-inch range from the floor to the bottom of the keypads on the elevator touchscreens. That's not an accident. That's part of building guidelines. And so this has all been defined for us. All of these things have been defined for us. On the kiosk, we had to make sure that when implemented that there was at least a 30-inch clear area up front for them to interact with it and a 48-inch area for them to be able to turn around and go away if the case was required. We had to make sure that, like I said, the person could reach it, all that sort of stuff. But these aren't my diagrams. These are diagrams from various building requirements that are out there in ADA and Accessible Buildings Act and all that sort of stuff. And they definitely have that stuff in Europe as well. Dumb shit happens when you don't consider those established patterns and standards when doing design. This is my favorite one. I use this in almost every slide or deck I can. It's a cardboard Ferrari Testarossa on top of some little, I don't know, European egg car, I guess. Yeah, so for every gallon of gas you guys don't burn, my big SUV burns too. So this is what I mean, though. Here's a video of what happens when we don't quite understand how things are supposed to work.
Pop-up button. Menu 252 items check mark. United States. United Kingdom. Afghanistan. Island Islands. Afghanistan. United Kingdom. United States. Closing menu. United States. Pop-up button. Edit text. Blank. You are currently on a text feed.
Yeah. So this is a jQuery plugin called Chosen. It's from the folks at Harvest. I don't mean to call Harvest out because I'm actually a very, very happy customer of them. But this is what happens. You heard it say you're inside an edit box. I wasn't in an edit box, was I? Is that what it looked like? It didn't look like an edit box. And so as it went down, you heard it go ping, ping, right? That's like voiceover going, no, 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 you can't choose this. So this is a case of not really understanding what this element is actually supposed to do. So this is what I refer to as the principle of least astonishment. I stole this from guys named Cunningham and Cunningham. Anybody here know who Ward Cunningham is? Anybody big in Agile? Hey, one guy. So if I said like Ron Jeffries, you know that one too? So this is actually a quote about object-oriented programming. It says, the result of performing some operation should be obvious, consistent, and predictable. And so that was about object-oriented programming, and it was relating to the object's interface. But I like this as a statement about the user interface and the way the user interface behaves. So going back to that example of the select element and what it's supposed to do, let's take a look at what one of those things do. So raise your hand if you think, oh, all I got to do is click it and choose one and I can go away. Right, that's what they thought. So HTML select element represents a control that presents a menu of options. The options within the menu are represented by option elements, which can be grouped by op-grouped elements. Options can be pre-selected for the user. Tab moves focus into the field. The second tab key selects the current item on the list, updates the field's value, closes the drop-down list, and moves focus to the next focusable item in the tab order. Alt and down arrow and or space opens the drop-down list, moves focus to the selected option. If nothing is selected, then focus moves on to the first option in the list. If the combo box is not editable, then the spacebar may also be used to open the drop-down list. Up and down arrow moves focus up and down the list. As focus moves inside the drop-down list, the edit field is updated. Enter selects the current item on the list, updates the value, highlights the selected item in the drop-down list, closes the drop-down list, and returns focus to the field. Escape key just closes the drop-down list, returns focus to the field, and does not change the current selection. Typing a letter or any printable character is going to move focus to the next instance of that visible node whose title begins with that printable letter. And it exposes these roles to assistive technologies. That's what a select element does. Did you also notice in the description of that the way that the select element also behaves when you start typing? It inherently has autocomplete on it. Okay? The only difference, I suppose, between that and some other autocompletes is there's no XHTML, HTTP requests going on or anything like that. But we have all that other stuff for free. We have the autocomplete for free. We have the accessibility of that object for free. It exposes its name, state, role, and value to assistive technologies for free. You may also not have known that autocomplete is an accessibility feature in the first place. It was meant to reduce the number of keystrokes required for completion of, or for selection of the item. And Google said recently in a blog post that it reduces typing by about 25%. And for Google, cumulatively, it reduces about 200 years of typing per day. By the way, these are all the all the results for my name. Welcome to the gun show. No, that's actually a guy in England. He is a legit bodybuilder. Fantastic body on this guy. And I'm sure, considering the vanity of bodybuilders, it must piss him off that typing his name in gets all this accessibility shit. And he is from Swanage, or however you pronounce that, in the UK. So we have this dueling, vanity surfing battles going on. So the iOS human interface guidelines say consistency lets people transfer their knowledge and skills from one part of an app's UI to another and from one app to another app. A consistent app isn't a slavish copy of other apps, and it isn't stylistically stagnant. Rather, It pays attention to the standards and paradigms people are comfortable with, and it provides an internally consistent user interface. And if you were to go and download the style guides, the OS style guides for any platform, Windows has had an excellent human interface guide since all the way back in Windows 95. Apple for regular Mac OS, Android, even KDE, all have a passage in their style guide that says exactly this: consistency, consistency. In other words, you want to ask yourself one question. Ask yourself this question, because the user is going to be asking that question when they experience your user interface. What is this thing and what does it do? Can everybody say that for me? What is this thing and what does it do? Come on, it's almost lunch. You're going to get to eat after you listen to me. What is this thing and what does it do? I refer to this as lesson 0. Lesson 0, obviously, the 0 index is the first item in an array. This is the one thing that everybody must understand before they go learning anything else, is that the user, when they experience the user interface, is going to go, what is this thing and what does it do? And the more they have to ask that question, the harder it is for them to use it. And accessibility, again, is nothing more than a different context. Okay? The user's going to be asking this question. Your user interface has to answer it. Now, fortunately, outside of the plain Jane HTML stuff that's out there, we have Way Aria to help us bridge that gap between the other cool shit that we want to build. Breadcrumbs, custom button elements, dialogues, disclosure widgets, tree menus, menu bars, menu controls. All that stuff exists now in Aria. And if you ever need to know how to use any of that stuff, or if you ever need to know all that stuff that I said about the select element, but for something else, Way Aria Authoring Practices Guide is the Bible for that. And the other cool thing about that is they also have examples for this stuff. With all of the JavaScript, all the CSS, all the stuff you need to do to manage any of these custom controls. Now, it's still a work in progress, so it's not like every single thing is there, but it's an awesome resource. So if you ever I don't know how to do that, bang. Miriam had talked briefly about, she mentioned the accessibility tree a couple of times. And this is a picture from a presentation on the accessibility object model. I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But what I want to do is impress upon you why that what is this thing and what does it do stuff matters so much. So on the left-hand side, we see just a screenshot of HTML in the browser. And that gets converted into, when the page renders on the screen, it gets converted into a DOM. There's a DOM tree. And our JavaScript can modify the DOM API. And as all the JavaScript, HTML, CSS does its stuff, it's going to get painted into the visual UI that everybody sees. That's usually the stuff that most designers actually just care about, is does it look the way it's supposed to. But it's also transformed into an accessibility tree. That accessibility tree gets conveyed to assistive technologies through the use of an API. The accessibility API takes all, those, if you've ever inspected an object or even just read out the constructor of an object, you see there's hundreds of different methods and properties on there that really, for the most part, an assistive technology doesn't give a crap about. It cares about a couple of things: name, state, role, and value. So the name is, what do we call this object? Right? What's the name for it? So for a form control, typically it's going to be the form label or something like that. The state is what's it doing, right? So if it's a checkbox, it could be checked or unchecked, and it could be also read-only or disabled, but that's its state. And implicitly, it also says not just what it's doing, but it can tell you what else it can do. So if it's checked, it can be unchecked, right? If it's read-only, then you can't do anything with it. If it's disabled, you can't do anything with it. But that stuff gets read out. The role is, what is this thing, right? So role of checkbox, and the value is whatever the value of the thing would represent. What's cool about doing this properly is that now the user gets all the information they need to know in order to understand what they can do, what this thing is and what I can do with it. So, and part of that also comes from the assistive technology itself. So depending on the settings of the screen reader, It can say, it can say something like radio, it can say something like a tab panel, use up and down arrows to navigate, or something like that. It'll give them those special hints. You don't have to do all that stuff. You've already enabled the assistive technology to do that because you've done the other part right. So what does it look like when we get it right? As a consultant, doing lots of accessibility consulting and stuff like that, I often have customers ask me, what does accessible design, what does an accessible website look like? And there's two answers. The snarky one is, I don't know, because there's so many websites that are inaccessible. But then what I do is I change the topic to what does accessibility look like? Because no user interface is going to be perfect from an accessibility standpoint. Even my own product, Tenon, is not perfect from an accessibility standpoint. But we can talk about what does accessibility look like when we see it. And hopefully, it shouldn't look like anything different than anything else. So I have a couple of examples of that. So this is a screen recording I took of the Schiphol website. Let's take a look at this.
In Schiphol vertical line, travel your way at Amsterdam Airport. Schiphol web content visited link, visited link, home, visited link, link to domain, travelers, list, collapsed link, open drop down link, Netherlands, visited link, flight link, part link, collapsed link, expanded link, transfers link, baggage link, pickup and drop off, arrivals link, non-visited links menu, auto web spots, links menu, headings menu, form controls menu.
So that's a quick video. It doesn't show anything special, does it? Doesn't show anything too terribly interesting. It's designed however whoever designed it wanted it to look like. But what I think is notable is that menu that came down was perfectly keyboard accessible. I didn't have to do anything special to use it with a keyboard. And as you saw, as I went through the rotor there, you saw all the links had good labels on them. All the links had good wording on them. The buttons had good names. The images had good alt text, I think. And the heading order made sense. That's really all you have to do. I mean, no, that's not really all you have to do. But you have to just think about how is this going to work and what sort of structure I need to put into place. And you keep whatever design you want. A little bit of a better example, pay attention to the carousel that I get to.
Trio Investments Management, web content. You are currently on web content. To enter the web headings menu. Heading level 1. Heading level 1. Investing across. Complimentary. List 10 items. Link. From a credit only. Link. Cleaner taxis in Peru. 2 of. Link. Marked. 3 of 10. Link. EY Film Museum. Link. Enabling Heineken to. Link. DOIT. Link. Bina Artha. Link.
So what happened is I clicked on the heading there. It took me right to that heading, and I could continue from there using the arrow keys. It said complimentary. It had an ARIA role of complimentary, telling the user that this isn't really the main purpose of this page. It's got complimentary information, but that's it. But then I could go through using the keyboard each one of these items in this carousel. Now, personally, I think carousels suck, but at least this one's done right, because when I gain focus to something that's not fully on screen, it pushes it on screen. And I didn't have to use this little janky arrow affordance to do that. It was just because I got focus, it moved where it needed to be. And so this is a great experience for somebody who might be low vision, who's using a screen reader or not, right? So somebody who's low vision might be using the keyboard but not using VoiceOver, and the behavior would have still been the same. It would still move focus to where it had to go, running out of time. New York Times website, great example.
New York Times, breaking news, world news and multimedia, web sections, navigation, button, banner, visited, link, home page, link, world. You are current, link, US. You are currently up, link, politics, link.
So I'm going to skip that because it's just more of the same. Going through, everything's got good labels, everything's got really sensible order, all that sort of stuff. Anybody know what this is? Wankel rotary engine, and invented by Felix Wankel when he was 17. He invented the rotary engine. Anyway, what I really like about this is it's sort of a metaphor for doing something that we're already doing, but doing it just a tad bit different. Ultimately, the Wankel engine turned out to be not as fuel efficient as and not as clean as gasoline engines, but it was great because Wankel set out to solve a problem that piston engines are really violent, right? Piston engines are often set off at well, it depends on the type of engine it is, to 270 degrees of rotation, and it's just shoving that piston back and forth. It's very violent, has a lot of vibrations. So Wankel said, I'm going to solve this vibration problem, and this was his idea. So let's look at some examples of what it looks like to try to solve existing problems. Now, this is not a great design, I admit, but it's not my design, so I can at least mention that. But this is great because we had Wesley up here talking about data viz, and one of the problems with data viz is that all of us immediately can look at this and draw some sort of inference about what's going on immediately. If we are interested in it enough, we can further explore by shifting our focus to whatever we want to see, and we can inspect it even more. People who are blind don't have that ability, right? Even if we did something like a lot of people would say, well, we could put a redundant table back there. And that's what we do on Tenon for our reports. If we have a pie chart, we also have a hidden table somewhere that has the same exact data. What if we could make it self-voicing?
Accessible SVG chart. Chart, time spent on creating a presentation. Options, x-axis, weekdays. 4 items, y-axis, hours working on this presentation. Data point 1 of 4. Saturday, 8 hour. Data point 2 of 4. Sunday, data point 3 of 4. Month, data point 4 of 4.
So this is using ARIA, it's using SVG, it's using text-to-speech API to create an ability to provide an alternative. Would this work on real-time stock market data? Probably not. But it's an attempt at figuring out a new way to expose information to all users. It's called Describler. I believe it's open source. It's made by a guy named Doug Shepard, who used to work for the W3C. Pretty awesome guy. HTML5 video was awesome. With HTML5 video, we were able to get rid of all the stupid Flash players that are out there and all the inherent accessibility problems with Flash, and just even the way you embed a Flash object in the screen can have impacts for its accessibility. So HTML5 video was just awesome. We now have a universal sort of way of putting video on there. Unfortunately, most people don't know this, that all of the browser vendors currently who support HTML5 video are a cause of people failing accessibility and having legal problems for it. So one of the requirements for video on the web is captioning. And so all the browsers out there have a CC button. If you have captions, great. Anybody know what audio description is? So if you can't hear, you get captions. If you can't see, you should get audio description. But there's no AD button on here, is there? No video player on any browser does that. So I want to show you audio description. That's not it. Shit. I thought I was going to escape all that. I'll just show you the code. So what's cool about the HTML5 video API and the audio APIs is nobody thought to tell me. You guys were just like, can I drag it? Woo, drag it. All right, cool. Awesome. So what's great is the audio element and the video element they give us events, right? So we have events that we can figure out. We can also have methods and properties to start something. So this is really easy. With audio description, you create another file. So you see here at the top, video file, and then next is audio. Now the audio is hidden, but it's there. It's HTML MP3 file, MP4 for the video. So now what's really cool, we just get a reference to the video and audio elements. We set the volume of the video 20% lower so the audio description can be higher. We then add an event lister to the video. When it's playing, when the video plays, the audio plays. When the video pauses, the audio pauses. When the video is ended, the audio and both video pause. And then we had to do a little bit of a hack to query whether the time is all the same. But now we can have a fully narrated external file that does exactly what we wanted to do, have audio description support. All right.
In those days, a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be registered. This was the first registration when Quirinius was governor of Syria, and all went to be registered.
So this is a really cool example. There's a lot of cool apps out there for kids who have dyslexia or other learning disabilities, and they're e-readers that you can have on your tablet or something like that, and they highlight the text as the narrator reads the book. And I decided to take a look around on the web to see if there was anything out there that I could sort of play around with. Unfortunately, the text-to-speech API fires a done event when the whole thing has been shoved into the speech buffer. So it's not giving you a done event for each bit, because why would it? It's shoving a whole string into the speech buffer, and then the done event is fired. So I saw this and I was like, yeah, this is awesome! But then what happened was I realized that what he had done, there's some sort of Bible API that gets you all the words in the verse and all the timestamps and all that sort of stuff, and it's like, ouch, it's really heavy lifting. And not only that, it's just for the Bible. So I can't just do anything. So this is something my colleague Yob, if you see him on the 10N wearing the 10N t-shirt, he just slapped this together in like a couple of minutes, which is awesome, which is why I hired Yob. But we wanted to say, let's leverage WebVTT for this. Now, I would never propose that we do this for a video, because that's what captions are for. But we did, all we had that had audio and WebVTT was a video. So just imagine that. Ooh, where'd that go? Please tell me there's a video for this. Shit. Well, oh, there it is. Look, yay, it's a live demo.
Wake up.
You don't see it.
Click link.
Thankfully, someone actually said something.
Mouse
All right.
click.
Cool. Let's start over.
Wake up. Wake up. Click link. Click link. Mouse grid. 1. 5. 5. Click. Click OK. Go to sleep.
Isn't that awesome? Just uses WebVTT. Now, and let's take this one step further. So in the previous video, we had arbitrary text, right? Let's take that arbitrary text and shoot that over to the Google text-to-speech API. The response from that API gives you an MP3 file. Then we can send that to another API from a company like rev.com or something like that to get it transcribed, transformed into WebVTT, and then we shoot it over there. And if anybody wants to work on that idea, let me know, because so there's the transcription API. Anyway, the entire point of my talk really, and like I said, I purposely oversold the talk by saying, bleeding edge design is, what I really want to tell you is there's nothing that prevents you from doing all the coolest shit you ever thought about, doing it accessibly, as long as we think of one thing. Yes! I like this guy. This is, by the way, I loved using this picture for that, because this is the Louvre in France, and what I loved about this when I went there was this is the entranceway. So over here is like the entranceway, and you go down the stairs, and you go and then there's right next to where you go into the stairs, there's an elevator entrance, and the elevator entrance opens right next to you. So if you let's say you're with your disabled friend, and you both go through the same entrance, you both enter the museum at the same spot next to Professor X. And yeah, so the elevator's right there. There's no elevator on the other side of the building. It's right there with everybody else. So accessibility is not a design problem. It's a challenge, and you can truly leverage your creativity to help other people. Thank you very much.
Mr. Karl Groves, thank you.
Thank you.